Lewis Hamilton just changed the feel of this season. His first Ferrari podium in China was not only a big result, it was a warning. Mercedes still leads the championship, Ferrari is still chasing, but Hamilton suddenly looks comfortable in a way he did not for years. He fought hard, looked sharp, and drove like a man who trusts the car under him again. That is why this moment matters more than the result itself, because something bigger may have shifted. Hamilton now has 33 points after 2 races, only one behind Leclerc, while Ferrari still trails Mercedes early in the standings. That alone is interesting, but the real change is deeper than points. The new 2026 cars ask for a different kind of driving. They change how grip fades, how the rear behaves, and how drivers manage the car at the limit. On Shanghai did not just show Hamilton scoring a podium, it showed signs that these rules may finally suit him again. That is where this story gets serious. For years, the old cars worked against Hamilton's natural style. Now, that may be changing. If the 2026 rules really brought back the kind of balance and feel he needs, then this is not just a Ferrari improvement story. It is a full reset of where Hamilton stands in Formula 1, and the reason starts with why the last generation never truly fit him. Lewis Hamilton was never the real problem. The old ground effect cars were. They needed a calm rear, a smooth line, and very careful balance through the corner. Hamilton has never driven like that at his best. He attacks the braking zone, rotates the car hard, and lives with more movement than most drivers want. That is why the last era never looked natural for him. Those cars use strong underfloor downforce, and once that grip dropped away, it could punish the driver fast. Hamilton's style depends on feeling the limit and working right on it, but the old cars gave him less room to do that. So the issue was not only pace, it was trust. If the rear stepped out too sharply, the whole rhythm of his driving changed. That is why 2026 matters so much. The new cars bring a different balance, a different feel, and a different kind of challenge. If the old rules took away Hamilton's strongest weapons, the new ones may be handing some of them back, and that leads straight into the regulation shift behind this whole story. The 2026 rules did not just change the look of the cars, they changed what the cars reward. These machines are lighter, smaller, and built around a different aero idea, which means the driver now has to manage the balance in a new way. That is why this season already feels different. The rule change did not only move teams around, it started to favor a different kind of driver. The old era punished sudden movement and forced drivers to stay inside a very narrow window. This new era gives more room to work the car and feel the limit without everything falling apart at once. That matters because some drivers are strongest when they can react, adjust, and attack right on the edge. So the regulation shift is not a small background detail. It is the reason the grid is starting to reshape itself. And this is where the story gets even bigger. Once the rules changed what kind of driving works best, the next question became obvious. Which team understood that shift early enough to build the right car around it? That brings this story straight to Ferrari and to the machine Hamilton helped shape for this new fight. Ferrari did not just give Lewis Hamilton a red suit and hope for the best. This car matters because he was involved with it early. He spent months working in the simulator, learning the team, and helping shape the feel of the project before the season even started. That changes everything, because this is not a driver trying to survive in someone else's machine. This is a driver trying to turn the car into something that speaks his language. That connection showed up in the way the Ferrari came alive off the line, and in how natural Hamilton looked once he trusted it. The team changed key parts of the car concept, and that gave him a platform that feels far more connected than what he had been driving before. Vasseur also made it clear that a driver becomes much more powerful once he is part of the build process from the start. So this was never only about a team change, it was about fit. But a good fit alone does not win the biggest fights. Ferrari may have built a car that suits Hamilton better, yet there is still a gap between feeling right and beating the best package on the grid every weekend. And that is why the next part of this story matters so much, because Shanghai was the first time all of that hidden work showed itself in public. Shanghai was the moment the hidden work finally showed itself. Lewis Hamilton did not just take his first Grand Prix podium for Ferrari there. He looked comfortable fighting at the front in a way that changed how this season feels. He finished third behind the 2 Mercedes cars, while Kimi Antonelli took his first Formula 1 win, and George Russell made it a 1-2 for the team. That is why China mattered so much. It was the first weekend where Hamilton's fit with this Ferrari looked real under full race pressure. The result also made the early title picture sharper. Russell leads the standings on 51 points. Antonelli has 47. Leclerc sits on 34, and Hamilton is right behind behind on 33. Ferrari is still chasing Mercedes, so this was not a story about total control. It was a story about proof. Hamilton had already shown signs in Melbourne, but China gave the first strong evidence that Ferrari now has a driver who can lean on this car and actually get something back from it. But this section is only the surface of the bigger shift. One race can prove a connection, yet it cannot explain why that connection exists or who suffers most when the rules reward a different style. And that is exactly where this story turns next. Because once Hamilton started looking stronger, the pressure moved straight onto the driver whose natural game may fit these new demands far less cleanly. Max Verstappen is not fighting the same kind of season Lewis Hamilton is. Hamilton looks more connected to the new rules, while Verstappen is dealing with a car and a format that keep asking for patience, control, and clean energy use. In China, Red Bull never looks settled. Verstappen qualified 8th, called the sprint a disaster, and then retired from the Grand Prix with an ERS cooling issue after running outside the real fight at the front. That is why this matters. The new era is not only lifting one style, it is exposing another to a very different kind of stress. The pressure is now visible in the standings as well. Verstappen has only 8 points after 2 rounds, which leaves him far behind Russell on 51, Antonelli on 47, Leclerc on 34, and Hamilton on 33. That gap is not only about one bad weekend, it shows how costly this new balance can be when the driver wants to attack, but the car and energy demands keep pulling him back. Red Bull still has serious speed in the right windows, but right now the package looks harder to trust and harder to extract from cleanly, and that is what makes the next part even more important. Plus, if Red Bull is struggling to adapt and Ferrari is still chasing the benchmark, then the team really controlling this early season may not be the one getting the most headlines. That takes this story straight to Mercedes, because while everyone watches Hamilton's revival, Brackley is the one setting the standard the rest still have to catch. While the headlines chased Hamilton's first Ferrari podium, Mercedes kept doing the one thing that matters most, winning weekends and stacking points. Kimi Antonelli took his first Formula 1 victory in China, and George Russell finished second, which pushed Mercedes to 98 points after 2 races. Ferrari is on 67. That gap matters because it shows the season is not being controlled by the loudest story. It is being controlled by the team that has understood this new formula fastest. Ferrari has real reasons to believe. After the China sprint, both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton said their race pace looked close to Mercedes, which is exactly why this fight still feels alive. But close is not the same as in control. Mercedes has been cleaner, more complete, and more stable across the first phase of the season. McLaren, meanwhile, is already sitting on only 18 points, which makes this early battle look even more like a contest between the team setting the pace and the team trying to close the door before it opens too far. That is why the final part of this story carries real weight. Hamilton may have found a rule set that suits him again. Ferrari may have built a much better fit around him, and Red Bull may still be searching for answers. But none of that changes the fact that Mercedes owns the scoreboard right now. So the last question is the one that matters most. Does Hamilton's return to form actually have the power to bend this championship before the gap hardens into something much bigger? Lewis Hamilton does not need this season to prove who he was. He needs it to prove that the right rules can still unlock who he is now. That is what makes this story so dangerous for the rest of the grid. Ferrari still trails Mercedes, and Hamilton still sits 4th in the standings on 33 points, but the shape of this season is starting to bend toward him in a way that did not exist in the last era. This is no longer a nostalgia story. It is a live championship thread. The key point is simple. The 2026 cars are giving Hamilton more of the balance, feel, odds, and freedom that suit his natural way of driving, and China was the clearest proof so far. That does not mean Ferrari has already built the best package. Mercedes still owns the strongest start. George Russell leads on 51 points, and Kimi Antonelli has 47 after his maiden Formula 1 win in China. But the gap between having the best car and having the most dangerous driver is where title fights can start to change shape very fast. So this is where the full weight of the story lands. The last era pushed Hamilton away from his strongest instincts. This new one may be pulling him back toward them at exactly the moment Ferrari needed a driver who could turn promise into pressure. Mercedes is still the benchmark, Red Bull is still searching, and the season is still young, but if China was the first real signal, then the rest of Formula 1 has been warned. Lewis Hamilton may not have changed at all. The sport may have changed back toward him.